If I had stayed silent, he would be dead right now. The thought hit me the second I saw the shift, small, almost invisible, like a ripple in still water. My hands were already sore from a 10-hour shift, fingers stiff around a tray of crystal glasses that probably cost more than my rent. The restaurant hummed with low conversations and soft jazz, the kind of place where everything looked perfect if you didn't look too closely. But I did. I always did. It was how you survived nights like this. That's when I noticed him. Not because he was loud. Not because he demanded attention. The opposite. The room adjusted around him like gravity had changed. Tall, dark suit that fit like it was made just for him. Still, controlled, dangerous in a way that didn't need to prove itself. Adrian Russo. I didn't know his name yet, but I felt it in the way people avoided eye contact when he walked past, in the way the air seemed tighter near his table. I should have just done my job. Serve, smile, leave. That's it. But something felt wrong. One of the men at his table kept tapping his glass. Not nervous, not impatient. A rhythm, too precise. Another man shifted in his seat, his eyes flicking not to the menu, but to Adrian's side. I slowed down as I approached, my heartbeat picking up for reasons I couldn't explain. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was just bad luck. I set the glass down in front of Adrian, careful, steady, pretending I hadn't noticed anything. But I had. I leaned in just enough, my voice barely a breath. Stay quiet. Don't move. I don't know why I said it. I don't know why I got involved. Maybe because no one else was going to. Maybe because something inside me refused to look away. For a second, nothing happened. He didn't react. Didn't blink. But then his eyes lifted to mine. Sharp, unreadable, like he was deciding whether I was a problem or something else. Time slowed. I could feel it. The shift. The moment before everything changes. And I knew, deep in my chest, I had just stepped into something I didn't understand. Something I wouldn't be able to walk away from. Because whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't meant for someone like me to see. And yet, I already had. The silence after I spoke felt louder than anything I had ever heard. My pulse was everywhere, in my throat, in my fingertips, in the slight tremble I could not quite control as I straightened up from the table. I told myself to walk away. Just turn, take 3 steps, disappear back into the safety of the kitchen where everything was predictable and small. But I did not move fast enough. Because something shifted. Not in the room. In him. Adrian did not flinch, did not reach for anything, did not even turn his head. But his entire presence changed, like a switch had been flipped somewhere deep inside him. The man tapping the glass stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. Like he had been waiting for a signal that never came. Another man at the table forced a smile, too wide, too stiff, his hand hovering just above the table before slowly pulling back. I felt it then. The wrongness. Like I had just interrupted something that was supposed to happen. Something precise. Something timed down to the second. I stepped back, clutching the empty tray against my chest, trying to look like I belonged here. Like I had not just whispered into the life of a man who clearly did not live in the same world as me. The music kept playing. Glasses clinked in the distance. Someone laughed near the bar. Everything looked normal. But it was not. Adrian finally moved. Not much. Just enough to lift his glass, take a slow sip, and set it back down with a soft, deliberate sound. His eyes never left the table. Never acknowledged me again. But I knew. He had heard me. He had understood. And he had chosen not to react. That was what terrified me the most. Because it meant he was not surprised. It meant he was calculating. I turned, forcing my legs to carry me away, each step measured, controlled, even though every instinct inside me was screaming to run. I made it 3 tables over before my hands started to shake too badly to hide. I set the tray down on the nearest service station, gripping the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Breathe. Just breathe. You are fine. You are just a waitress. This has nothing to do with you. Except it did. Because the moment I looked back, just for a second, I saw it. One of the men at Adrian's table was no longer looking at him. He was looking at me. And there was no confusion in his expression. No curiosity. Just recognition. Like he had already placed me exactly where I did not belong. My stomach dropped. I turned away immediately, forcing myself to pick up a water pitcher, to move, to act normal. But the air felt heavier now, like something invisible had wrapped around my chest and tightened. I could not hear the music anymore. Could not hear the conversations. Only the echo of my own words. Stay quiet. Do not move. Why had I said that? Why him? I did not even know who he was. And yet, something in me had known he was the one who needed to hear it. A shadow moved beside me. Close. Too close. I froze before I could stop myself. You should not have done that. The voice was low, calm, controlled. I turned slowly. Adrian stood there. Not at his table anymore. Not surrounded by men. Just him. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Not because of his size, though he was taller than I expected, but because of his stillness. Like every movement was chosen. Like nothing about him was accidental. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I was just doing my job. I managed, even though the words sounded weak the second they left my mouth. His gaze dropped briefly to my hands, still gripping the pitcher too tightly, then returned to my face. No, he said quietly. You were not. My heart stuttered. He stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the shift in the air between us, the quiet pressure of someone used to being obeyed without asking. Look at me, he said. I had not realized I had been avoiding his eyes until that moment. I forced myself to meet his gaze, and immediately wished I had not. There was no anger there. No gratitude either. Just focus. Sharp. Unforgiving. Like he was trying to understand something that did not fit. How did you know? He asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the truth was, I did not know. Not really. And somehow, that answer felt more dangerous than any lie I could come up with. I could feel the moment stretching too long, like silence turning into something sharp enough to cut. His question stayed between us, heavy, waiting. How did you know? I swallowed, forcing my voice to work even though my thoughts were still trying to catch up. I did not, I said, and it was the truth, even if it sounded like the worst possible answer. His eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in calculation, like he was weighing every word, every breath, every flicker of movement I made. I felt exposed in a way I could not explain, like he could see through every layer I had built just to get through nights like this. People who do not know, he said quietly, do not say things like that. My fingers tightened around the pitcher again. I forced myself to loosen them, to breathe, to stay steady. I saw something, I admitted, choosing each word carefully. The way they were looking at you. The timing. It felt wrong. I hated how small my voice sounded, like I was trying to justify something I did not even understand myself. He did not interrupt. That was somehow worse. Because it meant he was listening. Really listening. And that meant this mattered. To him. To whatever world he came from. His gaze shifted briefly past me, scanning the room without moving his head, like he was tracking something I could not see. Then his attention snapped back to me just as quickly. And instead of walking away, he said, "You decided to warn me." It was not a question. I shook my head slightly, my heart racing again. I did not think. I trailed off, because there was no explanation that made sense. No reason that justified stepping into something like this. His expression did not change, but something in his posture did. A subtle shift. Like a conclusion had been reached. That is dangerous, he said. Not as a threat. As a fact. The weight of those words settled in my chest immediately. Because I knew he was right. I just had not understood how dangerous until now. A movement behind him caught my attention before I could stop myself. One of the men from his table was standing now, pretending to check his phone, but his gaze flicked toward us for just a second too long. My breath caught. Adrian noticed. Of course he did. He did not turn, did not acknowledge it. But I felt the change again, sharper this time, like the air had dropped 10 degrees. Do not look at them, he said under his breath, so quietly I almost missed it. My eyes snapped back to his immediately. Too late. I knew it the second I saw the shift in his expression. Not anger. Not fear. Something colder. More controlled. You already did, he murmured. I could not stop the panic that tried to rise in my chest. I did not mean to, I whispered. He studied me for a long second, and I had the strange, overwhelming feeling that this was the moment that decided everything. Whether I walked out of here and went back to my normal life, or whether that life was already gone. Intent does not change outcome, he said finally. My stomach dropped. He stepped back then, just enough to create space between us, but it did not feel like freedom. It felt like distance before something inevitable. Finish your shift, he said, his tone calm, controlled, like we were discussing something ordinary. Do not speak to anyone about this. Do not look at that table again. My lips parted, but no words came out. He turned to leave, then paused, just slightly, his head tilting in a way that made his next words land harder than anything else he had said. "When you are done," he added, "someone will be waiting for you." My heart stopped. "Waiting," I repeated before I could stop myself. He did not look back at me. "You are involved now," he said simply. Then he walked away, blending back into the room like he had never left, like the entire world had not just shifted under my feet. I stood there, frozen, the pitcher still in my hands, the noise of the restaurant slowly rushing back into my ears like I had been underwater. "Finish your shift." The words echoed in my mind, but they felt impossible, because nothing about this was normal anymore. And when I glanced, just once, toward his table, the man who had been watching me was no longer pretending. This time, he did not look away. The rest of my shift felt like walking through glass without shoes, every step careful, every movement forced into something that looked normal even though nothing inside me was. I kept my head down, focused on simple things. Orders, tables, refills, things that made sense. Things that did not involve men who watched too closely or conversations that felt like warnings disguised as instructions. But it did not matter how hard I tried to stay invisible. I could feel it, the weight of being seen. Every time I moved across the floor, I was aware of where his table was without looking, aware of the man who had stopped pretending not to notice me, aware of the invisible line I had crossed the moment I opened my mouth. The minutes stretched. 10 felt like 30. 30 felt like hours. I dropped a fork once, and the sound of it hitting the floor made my heart jump like something much worse had happened. I laughed it off when another server glanced at me, but my hands did not stop shaking for at least a full minute after. "Just finish. Just get through this." That was all I had to do. That was what he said. And yet, every time I thought about the words "waiting for you," something tightened in my chest. Waiting where? For what? I did not ask those questions out loud. I did not ask anything. I just moved. Worked. Pretended. But pretending only works when no one is watching closely. And someone was. I felt it before I saw it again. That same man. The one whose timing had been off. The one who had looked at me like I did not belong here anymore. He stood near the bar now, speaking to someone else, but his attention flicked toward me every few seconds. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to feel it. I forced myself to turn away, to focus on a table near the window, pouring water into glasses that did not need refilling. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass. Pale, tense, different, like I had already become someone else. The clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. 18 minutes left. I could do 18 minutes. I had done longer shifts on worse nights. But this was not the same. Because tonight did not end when I clocked out. Tonight was waiting for me. The thought made my stomach twist. A sudden movement near the entrance pulled my attention before I could stop it. Adrian was leaving. No announcement. No attention. Just a quiet exit that still made space open around him like it always had. 2 men followed at a distance. Not too close, not too far. Controlled. Measured. He did not look at me as he passed. Not once. And somehow that felt more deliberate than if he had. Like I had already been acknowledged. Already accounted for. And now I was part of something that did not require constant attention to remain real. The door closed behind him, and the air in the restaurant shifted again, lighter, easier, like something heavy had just been removed. Conversations picked up. Laughter returned. The tension dissolved for everyone else. Not for me, because the man by the bar did not leave. He stayed, and when our eyes met for half a second, there was no mistaking it this time. He knew, not just that I had seen something, that I mattered. My breath caught, and I looked away immediately, focusing on clearing the nearest table even though it was already clean. My heart was racing again, louder than before, harder to control. 17 minutes. 16. Time slowed down just enough to make every second feel intentional. Every movement watched. When the clock finally hit midnight, I almost did not believe it. My shift was over. My manager waved me off with a distracted nod, already dealing with a late reservation. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. It should have felt like freedom. It did not. I walked to the back, grabbed my bag from the locker, and paused for a second with my hand on the strap. I could still leave. I could walk out the front door, get into my car, drive home, and pretend none of this had happened. Except I knew that was not true. Because he had said someone would be waiting. And something in his voice told me that was not optional. I stepped out into the night air, the city quieter now, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. My breath fogged slightly in the cool air as I looked around, trying to see what was not immediately obvious. For a second, nothing happened. No one approached. No car pulled up. Just silence. Then I heard it. A car door unlocking behind me. Soft. Precise. I turned slowly. A black sedan sat at the curb, its engine running, headlights off. The back door opened without a word. No driver stepped out. No one called my name. Just an open door. Waiting. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. This was the moment. The line I could not uncross. I took one step back instinctively, my grip tightening on my bag. I could still walk away. I could still choose not to get in. But deep down, I already knew. I had made my choice the moment I said those 4 words. And whatever happened next, it started here. I stood there for what felt like too long, the open car door staring at me like a decision I could not undo once made. The engine hummed softly, steady, patient, like it knew I would not walk away. My grip tightened on my bag strap, my mind racing through every possible outcome, none of them ending with things going back to normal. Because normal was already gone. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, then took a step forward before I could change my mind. The moment I moved, something inside me settled, not calm exactly, but certain. This was happening. I reached the car and hesitated just long enough to feel the weight of the choice one last time, then slid into the back seat. The door closed behind me immediately, soft but final. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something expensive I could not name. The city noise disappeared the second the door sealed shut, replaced by a quiet that felt deliberate. The driver did not turn around, did not speak. He simply pulled away from the curb like this was routine, like picking up waitresses in the middle of the night was just another part of his job. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, watching the streetlights blur past the window as we moved through the city. I tried to memorize the route at first, counting turns, tracking landmarks, but it did not take long before I realized I was not going to recognize where we were going. The buildings changed. The noise faded. The streets grew wider, cleaner, emptier. My reflection stared back at me in the dark glass again, and this time I did not recognize it at all. After what felt like 20 minutes, maybe more, the car slowed. A set of iron gates came into view ahead, tall, solid, the kind you did not get past without permission. They opened before we even stopped. Of course they did. The car rolled forward without hesitation, the gates closing quietly behind us, as if sealing something in, or keeping something out. I swallowed, my heartbeat picking up again as we followed a long driveway lined with low lights that cast soft shadows across perfectly trimmed hedges. Everything looked controlled, maintained, intentional, nothing like the chaotic world I had just left behind. The car came to a stop in front of a large house, though house did not feel like the right word. It was too big, too quiet, too still. The kind of place that did not need to show off to prove anything. The driver stepped out first this time, moving around to open my door without a word. I hesitated again, but only for a second, before stepping out onto smooth stone that felt cold even through my shoes. The night air here was different, cleaner, quieter, like the world had been turned down just for this place. Inside, the driver said, his voice neutral, professional, not unkind, not warm either, just a direction. I nodded without realizing it, and followed the path toward the front door, my steps echoing slightly in the stillness. The door opened before I reached it. Not by itself. Someone was already there. Another man in a dark suit, standing just inside, watching me with the same unreadable expression I had started to recognize. He stepped aside without speaking, allowing me to enter. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it again. That shift. Like I had stepped into a space where everything was observed, measured, controlled. The lighting was soft, warm, but it did nothing to make me feel comfortable. If anything, it made the silence heavier. I stopped just inside, unsure where to go, what to do, what came next. My mind was still trying to catch up with my body. This was real. I was here, because I had said 4 words to a stranger. Footsteps approached from somewhere deeper inside the house. Slow, steady, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten before I even saw him. Adrian appeared at the end of the hallway, his presence filling the space without effort, just like it had in the restaurant. He was no longer surrounded by people. No noise. No distractions. Just him. And me. He stopped a few feet away, studying me like I was something he had not quite decided what to do with yet. My pulse quickened under his gaze, but I forced myself not to look away this time. Not to shrink. Because I had already crossed the line. You came, he said. Not surprised. Just acknowledging. I swallowed, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. You said someone would be waiting. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly, like that answer mattered more than I understood. He took one step closer, then another, closing the distance just enough to make it impossible to pretend this was anything normal. Do you understand, he said, his voice low and controlled, why you are here? I opened my mouth, searching for an answer that felt right, that felt safe. But nothing did. Because the truth was, I did not fully understand anything anymore. And somehow, I knew that was exactly the problem. I held his gaze for a second too long, long enough to feel the weight of it settle deeper into my chest, long enough to realize that silence here was not neutral, it was an answer. No, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended but steady enough not to break. I do not. The truth hung between us, exposed and fragile. Adrian studied me like that answer confirmed something he had already suspected. Not disappointment. Not relief. Just confirmation. He took another step closer, and I felt it again, that invisible pressure that seemed to follow him, like the space itself adjusted to his presence. You saw something you were not meant to see, he said, each word precise. And then you made yourself part of it. I swallowed, my throat tight. I did not know what it was, I said. I just knew something was wrong. His eyes held mine, searching, measuring. That instinct, he said slowly, keeps people alive. Or it gets them into situations they cannot leave. The way he said it made something cold settle in my stomach. Because I understood what he meant. I was already here. There was no undoing that. My fingers tightened slightly at my sides, grounding myself. So what happens now? I asked before I could stop myself. The question felt too direct the second it left my mouth, but it was too late to take it back. For a moment, he did not answer. He turned slightly, pacing one step to the side, then back, like he was considering how much to say. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more controlled. Now, he said, we determine whether you are a risk. The words hit harder than anything else he had said so far. Not because they were loud, because they were calm. Final. I felt my breath catch, my mind scrambling to understand how I had gone from serving tables to being evaluated like this. A risk, I repeated, unable to hide the edge in my voice. His gaze snapped back to me immediately, sharp, focused. You were seen, he said, by someone who should not have noticed you. That makes you relevant. The memory of that man's eyes flicking toward me at the bar flashed in my mind, and my stomach dropped again. I did not say anything. I said quickly, I did not talk to anyone. I just finished my shift and left. I know, he replied, and something in his tone told me he meant it, that he had already verified it somehow. That nothing about my night had gone unnoticed after that moment. The realization sent a chill through me. He knew everything, or at least enough. Then I am not a risk, I said, trying to hold on to something solid, something that made sense. I did what you said. His expression did not change, but there was a slight pause before he answered, like he was deciding whether to correct me or let me believe that. Compliance, he said, is not the same as safety. The words landed slowly, sinking in piece by piece. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse picking up again. I am not part of your world, I said, more firmly this time. I just work at that restaurant. I go home. That is it. Saying it out loud made it sound real again, like something I could still return to if I just stepped away from this conversation. But Adrian did not look convinced. If anything, his gaze sharpened further. That is what you were, he said quietly. The past tense hit harder than anything else. My breath caught. I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. He did not hesitate. You are here now, he said. That changes things. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the silence heavier. I shook my head slightly, instinctively rejecting that idea. No, I said. I can leave. I can go back. I will not say anything. No one has to know. Even as I said it, I could hear how desperate it sounded. How much I needed it to be true. Adrian watched me for a long second, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not softness. Something more complicated. Like he understood exactly what I was trying to hold on to, and exactly why it would not work. He stepped closer again, stopping just short of where I stood, his presence filling the space completely now. "The man who noticed you," he said quietly, "does not forget faces." My heart dropped. "And he will not assume you are uninvolved." The implications settled in immediately. Heavy. Unavoidable. "So even if I walk away," I said slowly, the realization forming as I spoke, "I am still part of this." Adrian held my gaze. Yes. The word was simple. Absolute. No room for interpretation. No escape hidden inside it. Silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Not uncertain. Settled. Like something had just been decided without needing to be said. I looked down for a second, trying to steady my breathing, trying to think through what this meant, what I could do next. But every path I imagined led back to the same place. Here. When I looked back up, Adrian was still watching me, still waiting. Not for me to understand everything. Just to accept enough to move forward. "So what do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steadier now, even if my hands were not. Because if I was already part of this, then there had to be a reason I was here. A purpose. Something more than just being watched. His answer came without hesitation. "For now," he said, "I want you where I can see you." The words were calm, controlled, but they carried something deeper. Not just instruction, possession. And in that moment, I understood one thing clearly. This was not about letting me go anymore. The words stayed in the air long after he said them, like something that did not need to be repeated to be understood. "For now, I want you where I can see you." I felt my chest tighten, not because of how he said it, but because of how easily it sounded like a decision already made. Not a request, not even a negotiation, just a shift in reality that I was expected to accept. I exhaled slowly, forcing my thoughts to stay clear instead of spiraling. "For how long?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though the question felt heavier than I wanted it to. Adrian did not answer immediately. His gaze moved over me again, not in a way that felt intrusive, but deliberate, like he was assessing something that went beyond what I could see. "Until you are no longer a variable," he said finally. The word sat wrong with me. Variable. Like I was a factor in something larger, something calculated. Not a person making her own choices. "And what does that mean?" I pressed, even though part of me knew I might not like the answer. He tilted his head slightly, considering me in a way that made it clear he was not used to being questioned. "It means," he said, "until I know you will not complicate what is already in motion." The room felt quieter with each word. I nodded slowly, even though the explanation only made things more uncertain. Because there was no timeline in that answer. No clear end. Just a condition I did not fully understand. I shifted my weight slightly, grounding myself again. "And what am I supposed to do in the meantime?" I asked. "Stand here and wait?" For the first time, something close to amusement flickered in his expression, subtle and gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "No," he said. "You are not here to wait." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the hallway behind him. "You will stay here tonight." The statement landed heavier than anything else. Stay? Not visit. Not talk. Stay? I felt my pulse pick up again, a wave of resistance rising before I could stop it. "I did not bring anything," I said, the words coming out more defensive than I intended. "I have work tomorrow." "I have." I trailed off because the list of normal things suddenly felt fragile, like they belonged to someone else. Adrian did not interrupt. He let me speak, let the words fill the space, and when I stopped, he answered with the same calm certainty. "Everything you need will be provided," he said. "Your work will be handled." My brow furrowed before I could stop myself. "Handled how?" I asked. He met my gaze without hesitation. "You will not be expected there tomorrow." The simplicity of it sent a chill through me. Not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Like rearranging my life was just another detail. "You cannot just decide that," I said, the edge in my voice sharper now. "That is not how things work." He took one step closer, not enough to crowd me, but enough to make his presence impossible to ignore. "In your world," he said quietly, "that may be true." The implication hung between us, clear without needing to be explained. I looked away for a second, my thoughts racing, trying to hold on to something that still felt like mine. Control. Choice. But every time I reached for it, it slipped just out of reach. Because he was not wrong. Not here. Not now. I looked back at him, forcing myself to meet his eyes again. "And if I say no?" I asked. The question felt dangerous the second it left my mouth, but I needed to know. Needed to understand if I still had any say in what happened next. Adrian did not react immediately. He held my gaze, steady, unblinking, like he was measuring the weight of that question. Then he spoke, his voice even, controlled. "You can say no," he said. My breath caught slightly, surprised by the answer. But he did not stop there. "But it will not change the situation you are in." The clarity of it settled in slowly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. This was not about forcing me. It was about reality, about consequences that existed whether I acknowledged them or not. I let out a slow breath, the resistance in my chest easing just enough to think clearly again. Because fighting something I did not fully understand would not help me. Not yet. "Tonight," I said carefully, testing the word. He nodded once. "Tonight," he confirmed. The simplicity of it felt intentional, like he was giving me something small to hold on to in the middle of something much larger. I glanced past him toward the hallway he had indicated, then back at him. "And after that?" I asked. He did not answer right away. For a moment, I thought he might not answer at all. But then his gaze shifted slightly, something unreadable passing through it before he looked back at me. "That depends," he said. "On you." The words lingered, heavier than they sounded, and I realized then that whatever came next was not just about what I had already done. It was about what I would do now. And somehow, that felt even more dangerous. I did not realize how tired I was until I stopped moving. Not physically tired. Something deeper. Like my mind had been running at full speed for too long and suddenly had nowhere left to go. I nodded once, not because I fully agreed, but because I understood enough. Tonight. That was what I had. One night. One space where I could watch, listen, figure out what this really was before it swallowed me completely. Adrian watched me for another second, as if confirming that I was no longer going to argue, then turned without another word and walked down the hallway. He did not check if I followed. He did not need to. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then stepped forward, my shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor as I moved after him. The house was even quieter deeper inside. Not empty, just controlled. Every detail felt intentional, from the lighting to the spacing between rooms, like nothing here existed by accident. It made me hyper-aware of everything I did. Every step, every breath. Adrian stopped outside a door halfway down the hall and pushed it open. "You will stay here," he said, stepping aside just enough for me to see inside. The room was larger than my entire apartment. Soft lighting, clean lines, a bed that looked untouched, like it belonged in a showroom instead of a home. Everything perfect, everything distant. I stepped inside slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against the strap of my bag like I needed the reminder that I still had something of my own. Adrian remained near the doorway, not entering, just watching. "There are clothes in the closet," he said. "And anything else you might need." I nodded again. Even though the idea of using anything here felt strange, like crossing another line I could not uncross. "Thank you," I said automatically, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He tilted his head slightly, like he was not used to hearing that in situations like this. Or maybe not from someone like me. "Do not thank me yet," he replied. The calmness in his voice made the words heavier than they should have been. I held his gaze for a second, then looked away first this time, unsure what else to say. Because there was nothing normal about this. Nothing familiar. He lingered for a moment longer, then stepped back into the hallway. "Get some rest," he added, his tone quieter now, less direct, but no less firm. "Tomorrow will not be simple." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone in a space that did not feel like mine. I stood there for a long moment, not moving, listening to the silence settle around me. It was different from the restaurant, not filled with noise hiding something underneath. Just still, too still. I exhaled slowly, setting my bag down on the edge of the bed, the fabric sinking slightly under its weight. My reflection caught my attention in a mirror across the room, and for a second, I did not recognize myself. Same face, same clothes, but something had shifted, something I could not name yet. I moved toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to look outside. The ground stretched out beyond the glass, dimly lit, quiet, isolated. There was no sign of the city here. No noise. No movement. Just distance. I let the curtain fall back into place, my thoughts catching up with everything that had happened. The man at the bar. The way he had looked at me. Adrian's words. "You were seen." That part did not go away just because I was here now. If anything, it felt closer. More real. I walked to the closet, opening it slowly, unsure what I expected to find. Clothes. Neatly arranged. My size. The realization sent a small, sharp chill through me. He had prepared for this. Or someone had. Before I even stepped into that car, this had already been decided. I closed the closet door gently, my fingers lingering on the handle for a second longer than necessary. This was not temporary in the way I wanted it to be. This was something planned. Something structured. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands resting in my lap again, just like in the car. Trying to ground myself. Trying to think clearly. Tomorrow will not be simple. His words echoed quietly in my mind. I did not know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next was not going to wait for me to be ready. Sleep did not come easily. I lay there staring at the ceiling for what felt like hours, my body still, my mind refusing to slow down. Every sound felt amplified in the silence. The faint hum of the air system. The distant echo of footsteps somewhere in the house. Even my own breathing felt too loud, like it did not belong in a place this controlled. I turned onto my side, then back again, the unfamiliar bed too perfect, too untouched, like it was waiting for someone else. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me, but even then, it was not real rest. Just fragments. Broken thoughts. Faces. That man at the bar. The way his eyes locked onto mine like he had already decided something about me. I woke before the sun fully came up, my eyes opening to a room that looked exactly the same as it had the night before. Still. Quiet. Controlled. For a second, I let myself pretend none of it was real. That I had gone home, fallen asleep, and this was just another morning. But the weight in my chest told me otherwise. I sat up slowly, the cool air brushing against my skin, grounding me back into reality. I was here, and today was already starting whether I was ready or not. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching the smooth floor, and paused there for a moment, collecting myself. Think. Do not react. That was the only way through something like this. I stood and moved toward the window again, pulling the curtain back slightly. The sky was lighter now, pale gray turning into soft blue. The grounds outside looked almost peaceful in the early morning light. Too peaceful. Like nothing could reach this place. But I knew better now. This place was not separate from what had happened. It was part of it. I turned away and headed toward the closet again, opening it more fully this time. The clothes were still there, neatly arranged. Waiting. I hesitated for a second, then reached out and touched one of the hangers. It was my size. Exactly. Not guessed. Not approximate. Precise. That realization settled deeper this time. This was not improvisation. This was preparation. I chose something simple, something that felt as close to normal as possible, even though nothing about this was normal. Changing felt strange in a room that was not mine, wearing clothes I had not chosen for myself. But at the same time, there was a practicality to it. If I was here, if I was going to get through whatever today was, I needed to adapt. When I stepped out of the room, the hallway was already awake in a quiet, controlled way. Someone moved past at the far end, nodding once in acknowledgement, but not stopping. No one asked questions. No one explained anything. It felt like walking into a system that already knew its rules, even if I did not. I followed the hallway back toward where I had come from the night before, my steps slower this time, more aware. The house felt different in daylight. Less shadowed. More defined. But no less controlled. I reached the main area and stopped just short of entering fully when I saw him. Adrian stood near a large window, one hand resting lightly against the edge of a table, his posture relaxed but not unguarded. He was already dressed, already composed, like he had not slept at all or did not need to. He turned slightly as I approached, his eyes finding me immediately. There was no surprise there, just recognition, like he had expected me at this exact moment. "You are awake," he said, his voice as calm as it had been the night before. I nodded once, stepping forward just enough to not feel like I was lingering at the edge. "You said today would not be simple," I replied. I figured it would not wait. Something in his expression shifted, subtle but noticeable, like he appreciated the answer even if he did not say it directly. He studied me for a second longer, his gaze moving briefly over the clothes I had chosen, then back to my face. "Good," he said. "Then we will not waste time." My pulse picked up slightly at the way he said it. Not rushed, just certain, like whatever came next had already been decided. He straightened, pushing away from the table and taking a step toward me. There is something you need to understand before we go any further, he said. I felt my shoulders tense slightly, bracing without meaning to. About last night? I asked. He held my gaze. About what happens when someone inside a system fails. The words were careful, measured, but they carried weight. I felt my stomach tighten, not from fear exactly, but from the realization that I was about to hear something I could not unhear. Something that would make everything more real than it already was. And where I fit into that, I added quietly. Adrian did not look away. Exactly. The way he said it made everything feel sharper, more defined, like the air itself had edges now. About what happens when someone inside a system fails. I held his gaze, even though part of me wanted to look away, because I knew this was one of those moments that mattered, the kind you do not get to misunderstand. And I am part of that now, I said, not as a question this time, but as something I was beginning to accept. Adrian did not hesitate. Yes, he said. The certainty in his voice settled in immediately, leaving no space for doubt. He moved past me then, walking toward the table behind him, where a single glass of water sat untouched. He did not pick it up, just stood there for a second, his back partially turned, like he was deciding how much to reveal. The man you noticed, he said finally, was not supposed to act when he did. I listened carefully, every word feeling deliberate, chosen. Timing matters, he continued. Structure matters. When those things break, it means something deeper is already wrong. I felt a chill move through me, not from fear exactly, but from understanding just enough to realize how much I did not know. So it was not just one mistake, I said slowly. He turned his head slightly, acknowledging the point. No, he said. It never is. The silence that followed was heavier this time, filled with implications I could not fully see yet. I took a small step forward, closing some of the distance between us without thinking about it. And me being there, I added, changed that. Adrian looked at me again, directly now, his expression unreadable but focused. You interrupted a sequence, he said. Something that had been set in motion long before you walked into that room. The words settled slowly, each one adding weight to the last. I exhaled quietly, my mind trying to follow the logic, trying to piece together what that meant for what came next. So now everything is off, I said. He gave a slight nod. Adjusted, he corrected. Not off. Nothing is left to chance. That made sense in a way that was almost more unsettling than confusion, because it meant whatever happened next was not reaction. It was recalculation, and I was part of that equation now. I crossed my arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding myself again. And the man who noticed me, I said, bringing it back to the part that felt most immediate. He is part of that adjustment. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly, like that was the part he had been waiting for me to understand. Yes, he said. He will try to correct what he believes went wrong. My stomach tightened at the phrasing. Not if. Will. I held his gaze, forcing myself to stay steady. And I am part of what went wrong, I said quietly. He did not soften the truth. From his perspective, he said, you are a variable that should not exist. The word hit again, heavier this time. Variable. Not a person, not a witness, just something out of place, something to be accounted for. I felt my fingers curl slightly against my arms, the reality of it settling deeper. So what happens to variables like that? I asked. Adrian did not answer immediately. He studied me again, like he was deciding whether I was ready for that answer. Then he stepped closer, closing the space between us until I could feel the quiet intensity of his presence again. That depends on who controls them first, he said. The meaning was clear. He was not just explaining the situation. He was defining it, positioning it. I swallowed, my throat dry again, but my voice held when I spoke. And right now, I said, that is you. He held my gaze for a second longer, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes. The simplicity of it made everything else louder. I let out a slow breath, my mind shifting again, adjusting to this new understanding. Because this was not just about what had happened. It was about control, about who decided what I became in all of this. I looked past him briefly, toward the window, the quiet grounds outside, then back at him. So what do? I asked. This time, the question felt different. Not desperate, not uncertain, just direct. Because if I was already part of this system, then I needed to know how to exist inside it. Adrian did not hesitate. You stay where I tell you, he said. You listen. You observe. And you do not act unless I tell you to. The instructions were clear, controlled, but there was something else underneath them. Not just restriction, protection. I caught that before I could stop myself, and it changed the way I heard everything he had said so far. He was not just containing a problem. He was preventing something worse. I met his gaze again, more steadily this time. And if I do that, I said, then what? He paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough to make the answer feel deliberate. Then you stay alive long enough to understand what you have stepped into. The words were quiet, measured, but they carried a weight that settled deep and did not move. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This was not about getting out anymore. This was about surviving long enough to learn the rules. The words stayed with me longer than anything else he had said, not because they were louder, because they were final. This was about surviving long enough to learn the rules. I let out a slow breath, feeling something inside me shift again, not into comfort, but into clarity. Panic would not help me here. Fear would not change anything. Understanding might. I nodded once, more to myself than to him, and let my arms fall back to my sides. Then I learn, I said quietly. Adrian watched me for a moment, like he was measuring whether I meant that or just said it because there was nothing else to say. Whatever he saw, he did not challenge it. Instead, he turned slightly, gesturing toward the far end of the room. Come, he said. No hesitation. No explanation. Just direction. I followed without asking questions this time, my steps more controlled, more deliberate than they had been the night before. If I was going to survive this, I needed to pay attention. Everything mattered here. The way he moved, the way people responded, the way silence was used just as much as words. We walked through another hallway, this one wider, brighter, with tall windows letting in the early morning light. It should have felt open. It did not. It felt exposed, like anything could be seen from here. Adrian stopped outside a set of double doors and pushed them open without breaking stride. I stepped in after him and immediately felt the shift. This room was different. Not a bedroom, not a living space. It felt like a place where decisions were made. A long table stretched across the center, surrounded by chairs that were already occupied. 4 men sat there, all dressed the same way, all composed in the same controlled manner I was beginning to recognize. Conversations stopped the moment we entered. Not abruptly, smoothly, like they had already anticipated the interruption. Every eye in the room turned toward Adrian first, then to me. The weight of that attention hit immediately, heavier than anything from the restaurant. Because here, there was no pretending I was just passing through. I stood slightly behind him without thinking, my posture instinctively smaller, more contained. Not hidden, just aware. Adrian did not acknowledge the shift in the room. He moved to the head of the table and stopped, his presence settling into the space like it belonged there. We proceed, he said, his voice calm but carrying enough authority that no one questioned it. No one spoke immediately. Then one of the men leaned forward slightly, his expression measured. There was a disruption, he said carefully. We are adjusting. His tone was respectful, but there was something underneath it. Tension, controlled, but present. Adrian's gaze did not move. You are late in that conclusion, he replied. The words were not raised, not sharp, but they landed with precision. The man inclined his head slightly, accepting the correction without argument. Another man shifted in his seat, his eyes flicking briefly toward me before returning to Adrian. And her, he asked. Just 2 words, but they carried more weight than anything else said so far. I felt my shoulders tense slightly, but I did not move, did not speak. Adrian did not look at me. He did not need to. She is not your concern, he said. The response was immediate. Final. The man held his gaze for a second longer, then leaned back, his expression unreadable. No one pushed further. But the silence that followed felt different now. Heavier. Like something had just been decided without needing to be explained. I stood there, my mind catching up with what had just happened. They were not asking who I was. Not really. They were asking what I was. And Adrian had just answered that in a way that closed the conversation. Not dismissed it. Contained it. I exhaled slowly, keeping my breathing steady, my posture controlled. Learn. That was what I said I would do. So I watched. Listened. The conversation resumed, but it was not the same as before. Every word felt measured. Every response calculated. They spoke about adjustments, about timelines, about movement without ever saying anything directly. And somehow, I understood enough to know this was not over. Not even close. Because every time the conversation circled back to what had happened, there was a gap, a missing piece. And that piece was me. I felt it in the way one of the men kept glancing in my direction when he thought no one noticed. Not openly, not boldly, just enough to remind me that I had not been forgotten. That whatever Adrian had said to close the conversation, it was not the end of it. Not for everyone. I shifted my weight slightly, grounding myself again, forcing my focus back to what mattered. Because this was not just about being here. It was about understanding where I stood in a room like this. And the more I watched, the more I realized something that made my chest tighten just slightly. Adrian might have control here, but not everyone in this room was comfortable with that control extending to me. And that meant one thing. Whatever he was protecting me from was already closer than I thought. The conversation continued, but I stopped trying to follow every word and started focusing on patterns instead. Who spoke first? Who waited? Who did not need to speak at all? Adrian rarely repeated himself. He did not have to. When he spoke, the room adjusted. Not out of fear alone. Out of structure. Out of something that had been built long before I stepped into it. I kept my position just behind him, still, quiet, exactly where he had placed me. Not invisible, but not exposed either. That difference mattered more than I expected. Because every time one of the men glanced in my direction, their attention hit him first. And that changed everything. It redirected it. Controlled it. I was not standing alone in this room. I was standing behind him. And that, apparently, meant something here. The meeting moved on to details I could not fully understand. Locations. Schedules. Adjustments to something that had already been disrupted. But the tension never fully disappeared. It stayed just under the surface, quiet but present, like everyone was waiting for something else to be addressed. Something unfinished. Finally, it happened. The same man who had spoken earlier leaned forward again, his expression unchanged, but his timing more deliberate this time. The variable, he said carefully, not looking at me directly, but not avoiding it either. Needs resolution. The room went still again. Not as obvious as before. More controlled. But I felt it immediately. The shift. The attention. The unspoken agreement that this was the part no one could ignore any longer. My chest tightened slightly, but I did not move. Did not speak. Because I understood now. This was not my moment to react. This was his. Adrian did not answer right away. He let the silence stretch, just enough to make the weight of that statement settle across the room. Then he spoke. It already has won, he said. Calm. Final. The man did not look convinced. Temporary solutions create long-term risks, he replied, his tone still respectful, but firmer now. The push was subtle, controlled, but it was there. Adrian's gaze shifted to him fully this time, sharp and focused in a way that made even the silence feel louder. You are assuming it is temporary, he said. The words landed clean. Precise. The man held his gaze, just for a second longer than before, then leaned back slightly, not backing down, but not pushing further either. The message was clear. This was not over. It was just paused. I felt it then, the reality of what was happening settling deeper than before. This was not just about whether I stayed or left. It was about whether I was accepted into something that did not allow loose ends. And right now, I was still one. The meeting continued after that, but something had changed. The focus had shifted. Not away from me. Around me. Like I was now part of the structure being discussed, even if no one said it directly again. I kept my posture steady, my breathing controlled, my attention sharp. Learn. That was still the only thing I could do. Because every word, every glance, every pause mattered more than I understood yet. Eventually, Adrian moved first, stepping away from the table without announcing the end. That alone was enough. The others followed his lead, standing in quiet acknowledgement that the discussion was over. No one lingered. No one questioned it. They filed out in controlled silence, each man leaving with the same measured composure they had arrived with. But as they passed me, one by one, I felt it again. Not all of them looked at me. Most did not. But one did. Just for a second. The same man. His expression unreadable. His gaze steady. Not hostile. Not neutral either. Something else. Something that felt like a decision not yet acted on. My pulse picked up slightly, but I did not react. Did not break posture. Did not give him anything to read. He moved on without a word. The door closed behind the last of them, and the room fell silent again. Different this time. Emptier. But not lighter. I exhaled slowly, not realizing I had been holding my breath until that moment. Adrian remained at the head of the table for a second longer, then turned toward me. His gaze found mine immediately, steady, assessing. "Now you understand," he said. It was not a question. I nodded once because I did. Not everything. Not even most of it. But enough. Enough to know that this was not just about surviving anymore. It was about proving something. "They do not agree with you," I said quietly. He held my gaze, his expression unchanged. "They do not need to," he replied. The confidence in his voice was absolute. Not arrogant. Certain. But certainty did not erase what I had seen. The hesitation. The resistance. The way that man had looked at me like something unfinished. I swallowed, the thought settling heavier now. "But they will act if they think you are wrong," I said. Adrian did not deny it. "Yes," he said simply. The honesty of it made everything clearer, sharper, more real. I held his gaze for a second longer, then looked away briefly, gathering my thoughts. Because this was the part that mattered. Not just what had already happened. What came next? I looked back at him, my voice quieter but steadier than before. "Then I am not just your responsibility," I said. "I am your risk." The room went still again, even without anyone else in it. Adrian watched me for a long second, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted in a way I could not fully read. Not disagreement, not confirmation, something more complicated. Then he spoke. "No," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but different. "You are my decision." The words settled in deeper than anything else he had said so far. And in that moment, I understood something I had not allowed myself to see before. This was no longer just about whether I survived this situation. It was about whether I became part of it. The words settled between us, heavier than anything that had come before. "You are my decision. Not temporary. Not uncertain. Chosen." I held his gaze, feeling something shift inside me again, deeper this time. Not just fear or confusion, but awareness. Because a decision like that did not exist without consequences. Not here. Not in a room where every move was calculated and every outcome mattered. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the only thing I still controlled. My response. "Then I need to be worth it," I said quietly. The words came out before I could second-guess them, but once they were there, I did not take them back. Adrian's expression did not change immediately, but there was a pause. A fraction longer than before. Like he had not expected that answer. Or maybe he had. He stepped closer, just enough to close the distance again, his presence steady, controlled, impossible to ignore. "That is not how this works," he said. But his voice was different now. Less distant. More focused. I shook my head slightly, holding his gaze. "It is," I said. "If I am the reason they question you, then I cannot just stand here and wait for you to defend me every time." The room felt quieter again, like even the walls were listening. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then something shifted in his expression, subtle but unmistakable. Not disagreement. Recognition. He studied me in a way that felt different from before, less like I was a problem to be solved and more like I was something he was beginning to understand. "You are adapting quickly," he said. I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh, not quite relief. "I do not think I have a choice," I replied. His gaze held mine for a second longer, then he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "No," he said, "you do not." The honesty in that settled something in me. Not comfort, but clarity. I glanced toward the door, the empty space where the others had stood just minutes ago. The memory of their eyes, their silence, their hesitation still lingered. "They are not going to let this go," I said. Adrian did not follow my gaze. He did not need to. "No," he said again. Simple. Certain. I looked back at him, my pulse steadying despite everything. "Then what happens when they decide I am still a problem?" I asked. This time, he did not answer immediately. He walked past me, moving toward the window, his reflection catching faintly in the glass as he looked out over the quiet grounds beyond. For a second, it almost looked like he was somewhere else entirely, thinking beyond this room, beyond this moment. "They will not decide that," he said finally. I frowned slightly, taking a step closer. "You cannot control what they think," I said. He turned his head just enough to look at me again, his eyes sharp, focused. "No," he said, "but I can control what they see." The meaning settled in slowly. Not forcing agreement. Controlling perception. Shaping the outcome before it happened. I felt my breath catch slightly, the realization deeper than anything else so far. This was not just about power. It was about precision. I nodded slowly, understanding more than I wanted to admit. So I stay close, I said. I follow your rules. I do not give them a reason. Adrian watched me for a long second, then stepped away from the window, closing the distance between us once more. You do more than that, he said. My brow furrowed slightly. What else is there? I asked. He stopped in front of me, his presence steady, his voice low but clear. You learn how to exist in a space where nothing is accidental, he said. And you stop thinking like someone who can walk away from it. The words landed hard. Not because they were harsh, because they were true. I felt it settle in my chest, heavier this time, more permanent. Because he was right. That version of me, the one who could leave, who could go back to a small apartment and a normal shift, was already fading, replaced by something else. Something that understood silence, timing, control. I held his gaze, no hesitation left this time. Then teach me, I said. The room went still again, not with tension, but with something quieter, more focused. Adrian studied me for a long second, then nodded once, a decision forming as clearly as the one before. I will, he said. The certainty in his voice did not feel like a threat. It felt like a shift, like something had just begun, not ended. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders settling, my thoughts clearer than they had been since the moment I stepped into that restaurant. Because now I understood one thing completely. I had not just saved him that night. I had stepped into his world, and he was not letting me leave it unchanged.